Hola, soy Profe Omar y estoy aquí para hablar de los verbos. So this is a separate video designed to review you of basic Spanish concepts that might assist you in doing other work for the class. So this is the introduction to Spanish verbs. We're going to talk about number one, what is a verb? What is conjugation? What is an infinitive? Why do we conjugate? What's the purpose? What are first, second, and third person subject pronouns? Right? And what does first, second, and third person mean? And then what is the structure of a Spanish verb, in particular the root and the ending? And we're going to talk about the dreaded chart, the verb chart that you're probably already familiar with. So back to the initial question, what is a verb? Well, what have you heard about verbs? Well, if you said that a verb is an action, then you were almost entirely correct. There are instances where it's an occurrence or a state of being, but primarily what we think of when we think of verbs are actions, like the things that you see currently on the screen. Breakdancing, selling, throwing, running, swinging, reading. Those are verbs. So what function does a verb have in a sentence? Well, the verb is the first word and the word that the predicate is based on. It's the foundation of the predicate. So the subject completes the verb, the action. So I, in this case, I speak. I'm the one that is speaking, in this case, English, but I speak Spanish, right, in this sentence. So the subject is related to the verb, and we'll talk more on that in a few minutes. So conjugation, you can see here, it changes the word to give you specific information, and all of these are conjugations of a specific infinitive. All right, the unconjugated form of the verb. In English, it's preceded by to speak. All right, to speak is the infinitive, the non-finite, the verb without the subject, and then you conjugate, you change to give specific information. So I speak, you can see it changes. She speaks, you are speaking, we spoke, they have spoken, you all will speak. So what information does conjugation give us? So you can see here, it tells us who is doing the action, how many people are doing the action, when they're doing it, in what time period, what attitude they have towards that action. Is it something that will be done? Is it something in the realm of possibility, or is it a command? And then the voice, is it active or passive? This is more of a grammatical concept. In this case, in this series of videos and in high school Spanish, we particularly focus on person, number, and tense. So let's start with person and number. All right. So who is doing it and how many people are doing it? So you can see here the English subject pronouns. All right. On this side of the chart, this chart that we use for conjugation of Spanish verbs, one side is singular. And what does singular mean? Excuse me. It means one person is completing the action. Right? So in this column, only one person completes the action. On the second side, on the other side, we have plural. And plural means what? That more than one person is completing the action. The rows are the more complicated, or the maybe slightly difficult to comprehend, but not difficult in the end. You see the first row is first person, second person for the second row, and third person on the third. The first person is I, right? The one in your head. When you add someone to I, becomes we, right? Two people. first person includes I. Second person, you, the person that I am addressing. All right, so you. Can see the plural version in English is exactly the same. That's why we have to make slight changes to it to make our message clear. You guys, use guys, you all, or the popular y'all in the South. Y'all. So if I were to say, for example, you need to listen, in English you wouldn't entirely know since you don't see my face, who I'm talking to. Am I talking to you individually, everyone in the room, everyone that I'm recording for? That's why I would say y'all are learning the basics of verbs, all right, instead of just you. To clarify, the third person is the one that's being talked about, all right? He or she, and in English, it, to talk about non-gendered objects. And then third person plural is they. There's no variation there. It's all they. You can see these are the Spanish versions. We'll go through these more slowly. So yo is I. It's the first person, the one that's in my head, the first person, the point of reference. And I'm singular. There's only me. If I add someone else, like my wife, then it's nosotros. Nosotros. Nosotros, the Spanish we, has two forms, a masculine form and a feminine form. The masculine form is also used for groups of mixed genders, right? So probably a bit of gender history there, right? The masculine in Spanish is the one that you use for both a group of men and a group of mixed gender. If it's just women talking, and the person who is I is also a woman, it's nosotras. So nosotras en este caso, nosotras somos mujeres. But I, being a part of that group, would make it nosotros. So the second person, the one that you're addressing, in Spanish, it has some variation, all right? Because this person who's speaking, the I here, is addressing someone who's younger than him, he would use the informal form, tú, right? Tú. There's an informal form. So one person you're addressing, tú, means you. He would also use tú with his pal, with his friend. And he would use tú with pets. This is the informal form. It's used in casual conversation with people that you already know, that are your age or younger. Tú is a relationship that you're showing, the equality in the relationship. If it were that you were talking to your boss, then you would use another form, usted. All right, usted. That is the formal form. All right, in English, it's still you, singular, but in Spanish, you have a specific way. This is like addressing someone with a sir or a ma'am. All right, usted, usted es mi jefe. You're my boss. All right, if you're talking to a politician, for example, someone who's older than you, someone that you're trying to show a specific amount of respect, like we would use sir or ma'am. In English, you would use usted. All right. When you're talking plural, you use ustedes, unless, if you're talking to a whole group, y'all, or the y'all form, unless you're in Spain. If you're using this towards a group of friends, you would use vosotras. Vosotras is only used in Spain. It also has a masculine form, vosotros, to show that you're talking to a group of friends. And in that context, in Spain, you would use ustedes to speak to a group of people that you would use the formal form. If you were in a place where you'd say sir and ma'am to a group of people, you would use ustedes. But that's only in Spain. Luckily, if you're outside of Spain, ustedes is just the y'all form all around. You don't have to think about formal. You don't have to think about informal. Just use ustedes, except in the context of Spain. So the third person is when you're talking about someone, not to someone. All right, so you see Beyonce, since she's a singular lady in this case, she is ella, all right, which is the English she, a direct translation there, English she. James Baldwin, él. Él es un escritor bueno, all right. Ella es una música talentosa, por ejemplo. You remember that in Spain, every noun has a gender. So when you're talking subject pronouns, you really just don't use them. If you're talking about an inanimate object, you find some way you either exempt the subject or you use a demonstrative like esta, este, for example, to avoid that. You can, if you're being poetic, use el or ella, but it's usually just the sentence structure, so you don't use it. The third person plural is like nosotros, like vosotros. If it's a group of guys that you're talking about, the English they, you say ellos, but if it's also ellos if it's a group of mixed genders. So the brothers and their sister would also be ellos. If you're talking they, and it's only women, you say ellas, right? Ellas, as in the bottom example here. Ellas están felices. All right? Están felices. Ellas. So we've gone through the levels for Spanish. This chart is important because it's how we memorize, how we remember the different endings that we're about to talk about in Spanish. All right, so first person includes I, again, yo in Español, tú, usted, the formal and the informal, and then outside of Spain, you don't have to worry about that, just ustedes, the y'all. And then third person, ella, él, because it's el ovni, all right, ovni in Español, because it's masculine, and then ellos, because it's two guys. So let's go back to verbs, all right? We're looking at the infinitive here. The infinitive in English is to speak. The equivalent in Spanish is hablar, hablar. Every Spanish verb has a root or a stem. We call it both root or stem, and an ending. The ending is what is usually going to change. Sometimes, as you already know, if you're in Spanish 2 or 3, 4 as well, some change the stem changers. We'll have a specific video on those, reviewing those, but we're mainly just change the ending. All right, so in Spanish, there are 3 different infinitives. All right, AR, ER, IR. AR, ER, IR. And each of these infinitives have a specific set of endings, right, that changes according to person, number, tense, right, and also mood and the voice. But we're just focusing on the first 3. Right? So AR, ER, and IR verbs. Right? These are 3 regular examples of each of those, right, that we'll look at again in the future. Right? These are the ones that you're going to find in the dictionary. Hablar, to talk or to speak. Right? It's the unconjugated form of the verb. Once you have someone completing that action, then that AR goes away and you add the appropriate ending to give you that message. Él habla, or in this case, really, él no habla. Él está pensando en este momento. He's still thinking about what to say. So, él no habla, to give that message. You won't find habla in the dictionary, and if you do, it'll just tell you to see hablar for the definition. So, when you're conjugating, again, that ending goes away, and then you add a set of endings depending on, again, what tense it is. All right. Going back to the chart that you're familiar with, you can see that we've got the same subject pronouns here. First person, second person, and the third person, and then singular and plural on the other side. When you look at a specific form like hablo, this means I talk or I speak. All right? The O there gives you several different messages. It has several pieces of information embedded in it. That O means it's first person. I'm the one completing the action. That no one else is completing it with me. I'm singular. And in the present, I'm doing it right now. I'm doing it at this present time. Hablo. Right, we'll talk about some variations on present tense in Spanish in the next video. But you can see that that all gives lots of information. That's why we conjugate. All right. In English, a lot of times we just have to use context to understand the meaning, all right, or the subject pronoun. But in Spanish, it's not always necessary. For example, the subjects that just went into gray, they're not required because the ending is exclusive. It's only related to that subject in that tense. So they're really sentences. Hablo means I talk or I speak. Hablas means you, friend, right? Someone I'm equal to. Speaks or I or you, sorry, you talk. So hablas, right? Tú hablas. The tú isn't really necessary. Hablas. Hablamos. We talk. Habláis. Y'all in Spain, y'all talk. So those are predicate only sentences, something that we don't really see in English. For the as to the other, the third person and the formal second person, you do need a subject because just saying habla isn't always enough unless you've already established a subject in a prior sentence. So usted habla, you sir, you ma'am talk. Él habla, he talks. Ella habla, she talks. Ustedes hablan, y'all talk. Ellos or ellas, we don't have a separate gender they in English, they talk. Ellos hablan or ellas hablan. So that is the conclusion of our introduction to Spanish verbs. We've answered the question, what is a verb, action word? Also occurrences and states of being sometimes. What is conjugation? It's changing the verb to give specific information about the person, the number of people doing the action, and also the tense, the mood, and the voice. Why do we conjugate? Well, in Spanish, it gives that information. Right? Spanish is a very, it's manipulated within the word. It's morphological. We don't need context a lot of times to understand, in particular, verbs. The endings give us the information. What are first, second, and third person subject pronouns? We discussed those, and first, second, and third person is a framework. It's a method to understand conjugations, and then the structure of the Spanish verb. We'll talk about that further in future videos. And so we've looked at this chart. This chart is what we're going to use in the future, in future videos, to introduce their regular forms of the verb, and then to also discuss irregularities in conjugation. So watch this una y otra vez, over and over again, otra vez, again and again, to review if you need this review. Otherwise, just move on to the next video. How do you conjugate Spanish verbs in the present tense?